Shalom, Kol Halal Yahweh Bashem Abishai Bashem Wakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders. Salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so. To the hopefully elect, to the Yakwaf that are listening and learning, to the scattered Israelites that are among the heathen, sometimes looking like the heathen, bringing on that confusion to them, I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm from the branch of the Great Millstone here in Chicago, coming at you with another lesson in truth. And basically, this video is about how this society is socially engineered to benefit Esau in every way imaginable, and is socially engineered to hate Jacob. And that's both northern and southern kingdom. All right, especially Judah, because Esau understands the prophecies, and he knows that Judah is the head tribe, and that if Judah wakes up, then Ephraim wakes up, and then the rest of the tribe wakes up. All right, so he's desperately trying to stop this from happening, but it's too late. The wheels are already turning. The tribes are actually awakened. The elect are being sealed as I speak. The truth is going forth. The vibration is going forth. And brothers, you know, and you few sisters that support. I know sometimes the road gets really, really hard. It gets rough. But I was listening to the brother from Jefferson City, and he said, you know, a statement that is very powerful, and the statement was that we're fighting a battle, a winning battle. We're going to win this thing. No matter how bad it gets and how bad it is, we know in the end we're going to win through the power of Yahweh Bashem Abishai. So without any further ado, we're going to play this video from the Real News Network. All right, from the realnews.com, Salakia. And the video is called How Elites Crush Black Dissent. All right. And one of the ways that they do it is, you know, like the social engineering, is making anything and everything that any people of, and there's no such thing as black people first and foremost. This woman is brown. Her skin is brown, chocolate brown. All right. She's not black. Her skin is not black. So that's part of the social engineering. All right. Everything that's bad is black. Everything that's good is white. And there are no human beings that are white, and there are no human beings that are black. You know, humans come in different shades of brown, or they come in different shades of red, from super pale red to very red. All right. So without any further ado, let's let this video play, and then I'm going to come in with a few scriptures along the way.
This is Jacqueline Lukeman with the Real News Network. The systematic repression of Black or African-descended people is a common theme in many countries around the world, from the U.S. to the UK, to the Caribbean, to South America, and beyond. It's everywhere. It is constant. And as constant as that repression has been and is, the acts of resistance of Black and African-descended people to that oppression are just as constant.
This is Jeremiah 50:33. Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together. And all that took them captives held them fast, and they refused to let them go. The children of Israel represent the so-called natives and Latinos, people of Afro descent, so-called, in South America and throughout the islands, here in the Americas. And of course, Judah is representation of the so-called Negroes, West Indies, and the Levites, the Haitians.
But too often, these acts of resistance are not framed as such. What does it mean for the people affected when society frames their acts of rebellion and resistance as a riot? Here to talk about this today are João Costa Vargas. Professor Vargas is a teacher, a professor at the University of California at Riverside. Welcome, Professor Vargas.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And here in the studio with me is Eddie Conway. Eddie is a producer here at the Real News Network and a former Black Panther. Eddie, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I want to start with you because you have a particularly interesting story, I think, that ties into this history of uprisings among poor and Black communities in the United States. What was it about what happened in New Jersey a few decades ago that changed the course of your life a little bit?
Well, I actually had signed up to re-enlist to go to Vietnam. I was in the Army at the time in Germany. I was a sergeant. I had been in the Army for about 3 years. And I was going to go to Vietnam to fight to make the world safe for democracy. And I woke up one morning and I looked at the Stars and Stripes and I seen on the front page 30 or 40 Black women in the street of Newark, New Jersey, protesting. And you could see they were angry. And in the center of that street was an armored personnel carrier with a 50 caliber machine gun on it, with a belt of ammo running through it, pointed at these women.
Now let me add, if you notice, the shirt that he was wearing says American Indian Movement. Just another sign that the tribes are coming back together. All right? It wasn't by accident or coincidence that he just happened to be wearing the shirt that said that. All right? Then you had these, he came to the realization that these Edomites hate our people because they were pointing a 50 caliber machine gun with ammo. Now, I fired a 50 caliber machine gun before. And according to the Geneva Convention, the 50 caliber machine gun is only supposed to be used against aircraft. If you saw the size of those bullets, all right, and what a 50 cal hits you in the center of your body, it will cut you in two. If it hits you in your neck, it will take your head clean off. If it hits you in the shoulder, it'll take your arm right off your body. All right? It hits you in the hip, it'll take your leg clean off your body. The weapon was designed to be fired against aircraft, not against human beings. But of course, Edom, you know what? This is Proverbs 5:17. And it says, "In a proud look and a lying tongue, and the hands that shed innocent blood." Because they made laws that you're not supposed to use that weapon against human beings. Yet, this military man saw this weapon being pointed at a bunch of Israelite women. All right? Who were complaining about a wrong that had been done to them, as you're about to hear. This is also Proverbs 4:17. "For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence." That's all Esau does, man. But blood is going to come back upon him.
And behind that 50 caliber machine gun was a soldier. And I looked at my uniform and I asked myself, like, what in the world is armored personnel carriers with machine guns doing in the heart of the Black community in America? And so as I read the story, I found out that they had locked up all the Black men in the community and put them in stadiums and holding places and so on. And they had went through the Black community and they had ransacked the houses, kicked the doors in, tore stuff up. And the women were out there protesting about the treatment that they and their children had received after the men had been locked up, and wanted to know who was going to make it right. And it was that act.
Because they were being raped and everything else. That story has so much meat to it that's not even being said, being told.
Newark, New Jersey, 67, that made me decide not to go to Vietnam and to come back to America and see what the problem was, because Obviously, there were riots going on all across America in the black community, and people were resisting the kind of oppression that existed. And it wasn't getting publicized that much, in local.
And so when you resist Esau, you get labeled as a terrorist or a threat. Point blank, period. Right? And this man decided not to go fight for Esau, but to fight against Esau to help his own people, and became a Black Panther. Which, the more you learn about the Black Panthers, they actually, just like most of the gangs, they were set up in the beginning to defend their people against wrongs and injustice, and mainly against groups like the Ku Klux Klan and white gangbangers that would come into the neighborhoods and do whatever they wanted to Jacob. All right, both the Northern and Southern Kingdom alike formed gangs like this, but they weren't gangs. All right, Esau infiltrated and they became gangs. That's what Esau does.
Local areas, it was publicized, but nationally and internationally, it wasn't receiving that publicity, and so we were over in Vietnam dying.
Right.
So here you are over there dying for this devil, and he's killing your people back home, man. And there's no different. It happened in World War II. It happened in World War I. The same thing. When they were fighting the Spanish-American War, all right, when they were in Cuba, making Jake fight against Jake, they sent Judah over there to kill those Manasserites over there, man. There's nothing new under the sun. All right, you fight for a country. Hell, there was a whole unit of Gadites that fought and died in World War II. How you gonna fight for fighting for your country? Your country not even yours, been stolen from you. All right, but at least this Jake woke up to the fact who his enemy was, just not according to knowledge.
And didn't know that this was happening to our community.
Wow. You were in another country allegedly fighting for freedom, and did not know that on the streets of the United States of America, our people were fighting American people were fighting for freedom against the same military apparatus that you were using to fight for freedom in another country.
Yeah.
So the imagery of a tank, a military tank, on an American street was present in 1967. Professor Vargas, that brings us to the recent imagery of military hardware on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, on the streets of Baltimore, on the streets of Detroit during the 60s, and New York City and Watts. You know, when the media has covered these events, and usually it's an excessive police presence is brought in to quell the so-called violence. We see the military apparatus being brought in to bring peace and to bring...
They also bring in agent provocateurs to get rowdy so that they can have an excuse to do violence and make arrests. This is how Esau operates.
Things under control. What is it about these incidents that we are not told about, the narrative that we don't get when the media comes in?
One of the narratives that we don't get is the experience of Black folk, both in US and in Brazil, and I would say in the diaspora, is very much related to the hatred that exists in society against Black people. And this hatred is manifested in many different ways. So it's residential segregation, it's police brutality, it's incarceration, it's low education facilities. And this narrative is not part of how Black resistance in these places is covered. So the example that I'm familiar with is the Brazilian example, and is very similar to what you just described. So Black neighborhoods, Black historical areas known as favelas have always resisted. They have invented ways of keeping their safety. They have many times isolated themselves from a society that frankly hates them. And these acts of resistance are often interpreted by the media and by those in power as riot, as irrational, as actions that need to be quelled, often by the military, as is the case.
And see, they're afraid of the tribes coming back together and the uprisings, but it's going to happen. And as you see, the so-called Hispanics and Latinos are going through the same thing. All right? Why? Because they're the same people. Remember, in Virginia in 1681, when the Edomites prescribed the term white to themselves and started referring to themselves as white people. All right? In that same place in 1683, the Native American and so-called and the Negro so-called were both referred to as niggers. They were both referred to as being one and the same, that they were the same people. Why? Because they were. Matter of fact, one of the common names for natives was tree niggers. That's what they call them. That's what one of the names they called them, tree niggers.
As we speak right now in Rio and other cities in Brazil.
So right now, the military is active in favelas, in these predominantly black, predominantly poor neighborhoods in Rio and Brazil, under the so-called auspices of bringing peace or confronting crime. But really what you're saying is it's another manifestation of society's response to quelling uprisings and rebellions of black people against the conditions they're living in. Is that what you're saying?
This is what I'm saying. And I'm saying that in places like Brazil, it's in society's DNA, this fear and the hatred of black people that we can trace back to the days of slavery. So there's this idea that slavery was an event that didn't generate tension. And this is very common in Brazil. We tend to think of slavery as this institution that benefited black people, when in fact, black people resisted slavery at all times. So there are several historical documents, there are several books, there are several works of fiction that show how black folks in Brazil were constantly rebelling. They were constantly finding ways to push back on this system that dehumanized them. So they sabotaged the plantations, they killed white folks as many as they could, they set plantations on fire, they did everything that was within their reach. And this fear...
And see, Jake is not taught this history. They don't know that. We had successful uprisings and killed many Edomites in these uprisings, that these things fear. What happened in Haiti, and then what happened with Nat Turner, Esau was afraid of that. And Esau knew in the deepest mind and in the heart of his hearts, he knew that these people were right and righteous for doing what they were doing. He knew it. But Esau just did not want to give up his power or his wealth, no matter what he was doing was wrong or not, or even if he deserved what these Edomites got in Haiti, you know. And you can these images are pretty violent, man. They were burning their houses, killing them, putting them to death. I'm sure they had their way with their women the same way. Everything was done to them. They killed their children. All right. And according to the scriptures, it's going to happen again.
The fear of black insurgency is very much what explains these police actions in black neighborhoods today. It's the fear that black folks will leave their segregated areas and will be part of Brazilian society. Brazilian society has no tolerance for black people. So these operations that we hear about constantly, this is a constant of Brazilian history, is very much a response to this hatred and to this fear.
Now,
Eddie,
when you looked at the images of those people, hold on, let's go back a little bit.
These operations that we hear about constantly, this is a constant of Brazilian history, is very...
Now, these are the people that they're calling black. Right there. Okay? These are the people that they're calling black in Brazil. And guess what? in 1600s here in America, they would have been referred to as black as well. All right. Remember, there's certain DNA markers that connect them to the so-called Negroes here in America. The shovel teeth, that second toe on their feet, the second toe being longer than the big toe. Also, that those crooked pinky fingers, which were DNA markers that most Israelites have in common. But you know, Esau would never share that kind of information with you. But you have to remember, they killed so many of us. They were studying our skulls. And one thing that they found out, that the Negro slaves and the natives all had the same those shovel teeth in their heads. All right, but that's a whole nother lesson. Now that's not a definite, but it is a sign. All right, because you got to remember, we mixed and mingled, so chances are that a heathen could come out with that too. That a tear, I should say. Okay, but nevertheless, those were markers that Esau was aware of.
Very much a response to this hatred and to this fear.
Now, Eddie, Professor Vargas brought up history and the history of rebellion against slavery, not just in Brazil, but around the world where slavery existed. This brings to mind the Haitian Revolution, obviously. Can you draw a connection between the way the Haitian Revolution was responded to in the colonies in regard to slavery and the way rebellion and uprising by Black people in the diaspora is responded to today? Is there a connection that we can draw?
Yes, and historically there's always been a connection. When in order to oppress people, you have to justify that oppression to your population. That's where the very first concept of
that's where the media
white
comes
supremacy and racism comes from. The justification that those people are different. Those people need to be controlled.
That's your social engineering and the media. That's the main way that they do exactly what he's describing.
Those people need to be brought into civilization. The same kind of justification that they use for their population to accept the fact that a small minority of people, mercantile capitalists, adventure capitalists, etc., were getting wealthy from exploiting people of color around the world. To justify that, they had to justify it to their population also, and their population have to deem those people worthy of being put under those oppressive conditions. So it was necessary to show that there's not rebellion, but there's actual criminal activity. There's actual activity that we need to collectively suppress. That was an important thing. So even in Haiti, after the rebellion, after the liberation, it was still an agreement that you need to pay for yourself. You stole yourself from your masters, and that was their property. And so you were thieves. And so now you have to pay until 1945.
You hear that? They had to pay for stealing themselves, for setting themselves free. And that you saw in the image how they put to the sword and the knife all those Edomites. This is Ezekiel 35 and 6. Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity and in the time that their iniquity had an end. Therefore, as I live, saith Yahweh power, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Since thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. So the Edomite is going to die by the edge of the sword very violently and then go into slavery. Thus saith the Lord. Call Halal Yahweh by Shem Abishai by Hashem Wakakwadash Wa Abba Babal.